The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt in downtown Chicago hummed with crystal laughter, clinking champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a jazz quartet. 5 years. 5 endless years I had spent crouched over glowing monitors, writing code until my eyes bled to build Bennett Tech into a multi-million-dollar force. I adjusted my tie, looking across the room toward my wife, Chloe Bennett. She looked radiant in her tailored sapphire evening dress, her blonde hair swept into a sleek bun. Beside her stood Julian Vance, her sleek ex-boyfriend who had mysteriously reappeared from London 3 weeks ago, wearing a custom double-breasted suit and flashing a perfectly polished smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the main stage." The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. The crowd quieted as Chloe stepped up to the podium, her diamond necklace catching the warm spotlight. I smiled slightly, stepping closer to the stage. Tonight was the launch of Project Nexus, the proprietary software architecture I had designed completely from scratch. "Good evening, valued investors and board members." Chloe spoke into the microphone, her voice smooth and confident. "Bennett Tech stands on the brink of an unprecedented era. But to conquer new frontiers, leadership must be bold, ruthlessly competent, and aligned with our global vision." She paused, looking directly at me in the third row. Her eyes were devoid of any warmth. "For the past 5 years, our technical operations have stagnated under passive leadership," Chloe continued, her voice cutting through the quiet ballroom like a razor blade. "Because of critical technical incompetence and repeated missed deadlines on Project Nexus, I am officially relieving Leo Morgan of his duties as Chief Product Architect, effective immediately." Gasping echoes rippled through the ballroom. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Leo?" I whispered, my voice lost in the murmurs surrounding me. "To lead Bennett Tech into this new chapter," Chloe announced, gesturing grandly to the side stairs. "Please welcome our new Vice President of Operations and Lead Architect, Mr. Julian Vance." Polite applause broke out, led by Julian himself as he strutted onto the stage. He shook Chloe's hand, pulling her into a prolonged, familiar embrace right in front of 300 industry executives. Julian leaned down to the microphone, smirking directly at me. "Thank you, CEO Bennett. I promise to fix the disastrous mistakes of the previous management and bring true world-class innovation to this firm." Chloe stepped down from the stage, walking straight toward me while Julian followed close behind like a smug shadow. The crowd parted, staring at me with expressions ranging from pity to quiet amusement. "Chloe," I said, my voice shaking slightly as she stopped 2 feet in front of me. "What is the meaning of this? I wrote every single line of Nexus. I worked 80 hours a week so you could sign the sterling global contract." "Don't make a scene, Leo," Chloe said coldly, keeping her voice low so only those nearby could hear. "You were a decent developer when we were a small startup, but Bennett Tech has outgrown you. You simply don't have the executive presence or vision to take us to the next level." "He's right, mate," Julian chimed in, tossing a sleek silver business card onto my table. "The architecture you built is sloppy. I took one look at your back-end code and realized I could do 10 times better in my sleep." I looked at Julian, then back at my wife. "You gave him my project?" "The code I patented under my personal holding framework." "You built that code using Bennett Tech resources while receiving a salary, Leo?" Chloe snapped, her eyes narrowing with sharp irritation. "It belongs to my company. You're done here." "Chloe, I am your husband," I said, looking deep into her eyes, searching for any trace of the woman I had married 5 years ago. "I gave up my own career opportunities to build your dream. And I gave you a comfortable life," Chloe replied, leaning closer with an icy glare. "But I need a partner who elevates my status, Leo. Not someone who hides in a server room wearing cheap suits. Julian has international connections. You have nothing. Hand over your keycard and security badge, Leo," Julian demanded, stepping up beside Chloe and holding out his open palm with an arrogant smirk. "We can't have terminated contractors wandering around private company galas." The entire room went dead silent, waiting for my reaction. I felt the hot sting of embarrassment flush against my neck, but beneath the shame, a cold, Absolute clarity began to take root inside my mind. She had no idea. She didn't know that Sterling Global Ventures, the massive parent conglomerate funding her entire corporate budget, didn't belong to some anonymous board of directors. She didn't know who owned the controlling 70% of the parent holding stock. I slowly reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out my heavy chrome security pass, staring at it for a brief second before dropping it directly onto Julian's open hand. "Take it," I said quietly, my voice dropping into a steady, dangerous calm. "Good boy," Julian sneered, sliding the card into his pocket. "Now execute a quiet exit." "You made your choice, Chloe," I said, meeting my wife's dismissive gaze one last time. "You chose his polished lies over my 5 years of loyalty." "It's just business, Leo," Chloe said, turning her back on me to take Julian's offered arm. "Try to leave with some dignity." "Oh, I'm leaving," I whispered to myself as I turned and walked out of the glowing ballroom into the dark night. And when Nexus crashes, don't ask me to save you. Rain struck the living room windows of our suburban home as I dragged a cardboard box across the hardwood floor. The house felt hollow, a quiet museum of 5 years spent building someone else's dream. "Leo," a gentle voice called from the front hallway. I turned to see my mother, Grace Morgan, shaking out her wet umbrella. Her sharp eyes took in the half-empty bookshelves and open suitcases scattered around the room. "Mom," I said, setting down a stack of books, "you didn't need to drive over in this storm. When you called me from the hotel parking lot, I knew you shouldn't be alone," Grace said, walking over to pull me into a tight embrace. "She really fired you in front of everyone?" "In front of 300 investors," I replied, a bitter edge clinging to my words. "She handed my entire life's work over to Julian Vance." "That ungrateful woman," Grace said, her jaw tightening with quiet anger. "You spent 5 years slaving away in that basement office while she played high society CEO. She forgot who actually built that company from nothing." "I thought loyalty meant something to her, Mom," I said, opening my desk drawer to clear out my private hard drives. "I gave up my own career path to support her ambition." "Loyalty means everything to the right person, Leo," Grace stated firmly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But Chloe only loves status. Cut ties completely. Do not let her drag you down anymore." "I'm done trying to save her from herself," I agreed. I plugged my encrypted external drive into my personal laptop to back up my remaining files. As the system synchronized, an automated security notification flashed red on my screen. I stared at the lines of text, my blood instantly turning to ice. "What is it, Leo?" Grace asked, noticing my sudden stillness. "Julian," I whispered, pointing at the screen. "He accessed the server 3 hours before the gala started. He transferred the primary repository of Project Nexus directly into his personal cloud storage. Is that legal?" Grace demanded, leaning closer. "No," I said, opening the administrative log. "And look here. Chloe authorized the elevated root access herself using her master key. She didn't just fire me. She helped him steal my proprietary core algorithms." "That code is yours, isn't it?" Grace asked. "The baseline framework is patented under my name through Morgan Holdings," I said, closing the laptop with a heavy snap. "Julian thinks he copied raw code he can edit. He has no idea that the system relies on an encrypted hardware key tied to my private license." The front door unlocked with a sharp click. Footsteps echoed down the foyer, and Chloe walked into the room, holding her heels in one hand and her evening dress slightly damp from the rain. She stopped dead when she saw my mother standing beside me. "Grace," Chloe said, startled. She adjusted her composure, turning to me with a tired, annoyed sigh. "Leo, why are you packing boxes? Don't be dramatic." "I'm leaving, Chloe," I said plainly. "Look, I know tonight was rough," Chloe said, crossing her arms and leaning against the doorframe. "It was business. Julian needed a clean entry to impress the board. If you had just stayed calm, we could have discussed a quiet advisory role for you behind the scenes." "An advisory role?" I let out a soft, cold laugh. "You publicly humiliated me, stripped my title, and gave my creation to your ex-boyfriend. Julian has international prestige, Leo," Chloe snapped, her voice rising in frustration. Investors don't want a quiet programmer representing a multi-million-dollar tech firm. They want someone with confidence. You should be happy the company we built is expanding. You didn't build anything, Chloe, Grace interjected coldly, stepping forward. My son wrote every single line of code that keeps your lights on. Stay out of this, Grace. Chloe fired back, glaring at my mother. Leo, stop acting like a victim. You live in this house because of my position as CEO. I paid 60% of the mortgage on this house, Chloe. I reminded her, pulling a crisp white document from my leather briefcase and placing it on the kitchen counter between us. Here are the prenuptial separation forms. My attorney drafted them 2 years ago when we bought the property. Chloe stared at the papers, her eyes flickering with sudden doubt. Separation? You're divorcing me over a job title. I'm divorcing you because you have no integrity, I said, zipping up my main duffel bag. You let Julian steal my code tonight. You signed off on his root access. He needed the repository to prepare tomorrow's server integration. Chloe said defensively, though her voice faltered slightly. It's company property anyway. No, Chloe, I said, looking her in the eye with complete detachment. Bennett Tech holds a temporary user license. The underlying patents belong to me personally. Julian didn't copy a working product. He copied a locked door. What are you talking about? Chloe frowned, her brows furrowing. You'll figure it out soon enough, I said, grabbing my suit jacket and picking up my luggage. When the server protocols request my private security key tomorrow morning, ask your new vice president to provide it. Leo, wait, Chloe called out, taking a step toward me as I walked toward the front door. Don't walk out like this. You're making a massive mistake. The only mistake I made was wasting 5 years on someone who traded real loyalty for cheap status, I said. I opened the front door, stepping out into the cool night air alongside my mother. Rain poured down from the dark sky, washing away the last remnants of my old life as I walked away without looking back once. The high-speed elevator glided silently up to the top floor of the Sterling Global Ventures Tower. I adjusted my charcoal suit jacket, stepping out into the expansive corner suite overlooking Michigan Avenue. Leo, my boy, Chairman Arthur Sterling exclaimed, rising immediately from his massive mahogany desk. The 62-year-old titan of industry walked forward with open arms, clapping a heavy, warm hand onto my shoulder. It is good to see you, though I wish it were under far better circumstances. Thank you, Arthur, I said, offering a tight, appreciative smile. I appreciate you taking this meeting on such short notice. Short notice? Arthur scoffed softly, guiding me toward a glass conference table. When the controlling shareholder of our entire enterprise calls, everything else stops. Sit, please. A sharp, elegant woman in a tailored black suit stood near the window, closing a thick leather folder. She walked over with precise, confident steps. Leo, this is Victoria Thorne, our chief legal officer, Arthur introduced her. She has spent the last 2 hours reviewing the press releases from Bennett Tech's gala last night. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Mr. Morgan, Victoria said, extending her hand for a firm, professional handshake. I have read your original patent filings. What Chloe Bennett and Julian Vance pulled last night is not just morally bankrupt. It is a direct violation of our corporate licensing structure. I saw the broadcast footage, Leo, Arthur said, his face darkening with genuine outrage as he sat across from me. To publicly humiliate you? To call the brilliant mind behind our entire software architecture incompetent in front of the board? She has no idea she was mocking her own boss. She only saw what I allowed her to see, Arthur, I said quietly, leaning my forearms against the cool glass table. I kept my position as majority owner of Sterling Global completely private, so she could build her confidence as CEO. I wanted her to shine on her own merits. And she repaid your generosity by tossing you aside for a snake in an expensive suit, Victoria stated plainly, opening her folder to reveal several stamped legal documents. Let's discuss our immediate recourse. What are our options, Victoria? I asked. Since you hold the personal patents for the core algorithms behind Project Nexus, Bennett Tech's operation relies entirely on a conditional sublicense granted through Sterling Global, Victoria explained, pointing her silver pen at a highlighted clause. Clause 9 clearly states that any unauthorized transfer of source code or alteration of lead administrative credentials grants us the right to execute an immediate, total revocation of software licensing. Julian transferred the master repository to his personal cloud account last night. I revealed. Chloe authorized it herself. Arthur slammed his fist onto the table, his eyes flashing with thunderous anger. That constitutes blatant corporate espionage and intellectual property theft. Victoria, draw up the revocation papers immediately. They are already drafted, Chairman. Victoria replied smoothly with a sharp, lethal smile. We can freeze their operational authorization by close of business today. Wait, I said, raising my hand to pause them both. Arthur frowned, leaning back in his leather chair. Wait, Leo, they stole your life's work and stripped your title in front of 300 people. Why hesitate? I don't want a messy, chaotic brawl in the tabloids, Arthur. I explained calmly, feeling a steady sense of purpose settle over my chest. If we revoke the license today, Chloe will simply blame server bugs and demand more funding from investors. I want her to face the full weight of her choices. What do you propose, then? Victoria asked, eyeing me with renewed curiosity. We let Bennett Tech attempt their live deployment with Julian at the helm, I said. Without my hardware encryption key, their servers will stall within 48 hours. When their enterprise system crashes, Chloe will have no choice but to beg Sterling Global for an emergency intervention. And that is when we strike. Arthur realized a slow, proud grin spreading across his weathered face. We host an emergency executive restructuring summit right here in this boardroom. Precisely, I agreed. Instead of hiding in the background, I will officially step into my public role as CEO and controlling shareholder of Sterling Global Ventures. It is about time, Leo, Arthur said warmly, reaching across the table to clasp my hand firmly. You have spent 5 years building everyone else's empire while hiding in the shadows. It is time you stepped into the light and took your rightful throne. The legal filings for your formal executive installation are ready for your signature, Mr. Morgan, Victoria added, sliding a blue leather binder toward me along with a heavy gold fountain pen. Once you sign, every subsidiary under the Sterling umbrella, including Bennett Tech, answers directly to you. I picked up the pen, feeling the cool weight of the metal between my fingers. For 5 years, I had diluted my own identity to elevate a woman who viewed my humility as weakness. I pressed the pen to the paper, signing my full legal name across the line. It is done, Victoria declared, taking the folder back with absolute satisfaction. I will schedule the emergency summit for Friday morning. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Arthur, I said, standing up from the conference table. Get ready, Leo, Arthur said, walking me back toward the private elevator with a bright, victorious gleam in his eyes. When Chloe Bennett walks through those doors on Friday, her entire world is going to change. No, Arthur, I replied softly as the elevator doors opened before me. Her world already changed last night. She just doesn't know it yet. For days after my public firing, I sat quietly in my apartment kitchen, sipping coffee while reading through Sterling Global's morning financial reports. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. My life felt lighter, completely free from the relentless stress that had defined the past 5 years. My personal cell phone buzzed loudly against the wooden table. I looked down at the glowing screen. Chloe's name flashed across the display, accompanied by 3 frantic text notifications. I let it ring until it stopped, taking another calm sip of my morning coffee. 3 seconds later, the phone rang again. I swiped the green button and placed the phone on speaker mode. Hello, Chloe. Leo. Thank God you finally answered, Chloe screamed through the speaker, her voice trembling with intense panic and background noise. Where are you right now? I'm at home enjoying my morning, I answered smoothly, leaning back in my chair. Why are you calling me so early? The entire system is down, Leo, Chloe shrieked, sounds of yelling engineers echoing behind her. Project Nexus crashed 20 minutes ago. Every single corporate dashboard is displaying a critical access error. Our primary enterprise clients can't log in. Is that so? I asked, my tone entirely flat and unbothered. That sounds like a major operational crisis for your new leadership. Don't take that tone with me, Leo, Chloe snapped, her frustration flaring up despite her obvious terror. Julian has been in the server room for 3 hours trying to debug the backend, but the whole database keeps resetting itself. Julian assured 300 gala guests that my code was sloppy and that he could run the system 10 times better in his sleep. I reminded her with a cold, amused smile. Why doesn't he simply rewrite the algorithms? Leo, stop being so arrogant, Chloe pleaded, her voice cracking under the mounting pressure. We are losing $50,000 every minute the platform stays offline. Sterling Global's compliance team just sent an automated warning letter. If we don't restore full functionality by noon, they will terminate our $40 million contract. Then I suggest Julian works faster, I replied quietly. He can't fix it, okay? Chloe burst out, her pride completely shattering over the phone line. He said there is an encrypted hardware security block tied directly to a private administrative signature key. He can't bypass it without root authorization. That isn't a bug, Chloe, I explained, resting my hand flat on the table. That is my patented security architecture. It requires my personal cryptographic key every 72 hours to verify system integrity. Then send me the key right now, Chloe demanded instantly. Text it to my phone. No, I said firmly. Silence fell over the phone line for 3 full seconds, save for the faint sound of typing in her background. What do you mean, no? Chloe asked, sounding bewildered. Leo, I am your wife. You served me with formal termination papers, and I left prenuptial separation documents on your kitchen counter. I corrected her coldly. We are neither married nor business associates anymore. Fine. I will hire you as an independent contractor. Chloe bargained frantically, her voice growing higher in pitch. I will pay you $10,000 cash right now just to log into the terminal and input the administrative passkey. Just fix the servers. My services are not for sale, Chloe, I answered, my voice steady as steel. You publicly branded me as incompetent. You handed my life's work to a fraud. Now you can live with the consequences of your executive decisions. Leo, please. Chloe wept, dropping all her former hostility into sheer desperation. You are destroying Bennett Tech. Everything we built together will go bankrupt by the end of the day. How can you be so cruel? I didn't destroy Bennett Tech, Chloe, I said softly. Your blind ambition and greed destroyed at the moment you traded loyalty for Julian's empty promises. What am I supposed to tell the board? She sobbed into the receiver. What am I supposed to tell Chairman Arthur Sterling? You don't have to tell him anything over the phone, I said, checking my wristwatch. Chairman Sterling has already summoned your executive board to an emergency restructuring meeting at Sterling Global Ventures headquarters. An emergency meeting? Chloe stammered, her breath hitching. Today, 10 o'clock sharp in the main top-floor boardroom, I informed her. If you want any chance of saving your company from total liquidation, you and Julian had better be sitting in those chairs. Will you be there? Chloe asked hesitantly, her voice filled with a sudden, faint spark of hope. Can we talk before we go into the chairman's office? We can fix this together, Leo, just like we used to. Any discussion regarding the survival of Bennett Tech will happen inside that boardroom, I stated plainly, offering no warmth or comfort. Do not be late, Chloe. Leo, wait. I pressed the red button, disconnecting the call before she could utter another word. I set the phone down on the table, standing up to walk toward my bedroom closet. I pulled out my finest navy blue bespoke suit, smoothing down the lapels with absolute calm. The time for hiding behind corporate titles and quiet modesty was over. In less than 2 hours, Chloe Bennett and Julian Vance would finally learn who held the true power behind their empire. The polished mahogany doors of the main boardroom at Sterling Global Ventures stood open. I sat inside a private anteroom adjacent to the main hall, quietly sipping glass-bottled water while listening to the voices echoing from across the corridor. Just let me do the talking, Chloe. Julian's confident voice echoed down the marble hallway. Old man Sterling is a traditionalist. I'll pitch him an updated roadmap, lay the blame for the server crash on Leo's outdated architecture, and secure our contract extension. Are you sure you can convince him, Julian? Chloe asked, her tone laced with nervous exhaustion. Our platform is completely dark. If Sterling Global pulls funding today, Bennett Tech goes under by nightfall. Trust me, Julian replied smoothly. Charm and confidence open every corporate door. I've handled tougher investors than Arthur Sterling. Footsteps entered the main boardroom as the heavy double doors clicked shut. I stood up, adjusting the cuffs of my bespoke navy suit, and waited for the exact moment. Inside the boardroom, Chairman Arthur Sterling sat at the head of a 20-foot glass conference table, flanked by Chief Legal Officer Victoria Thorne. Chloe and Julian sat across from them, gripping thick leather folders. Mr. Sterling, thank you for agreeing to this emergency meeting, Chloe began hastily, leaning forward with a practiced, bright smile. We are currently implementing a major server upgrade to enhance long-term system stability. A system upgrade, Mrs. Bennett? Arthur asked, his tone dry as bone as he rested his folded hands on the table. My technical monitoring team reports that your entire enterprise infrastructure has been completely offline for over 4 hours. It's a temporary migration hiccup, Chairman Sterling. Julian cut in, offering a sleek, polished grin. The previous architect, Leo Morgan, left us with a rather sloppy back-end codebase. I am personally refactoring his obsolete security algorithms to ensure world-class performance. Obsolete security algorithms? Arthur raised an eyebrow, staring at Julian with cold, penetrating eyes. Is that your official assessment, Mr. Vance? Absolutely, Julian declared, tapping his folder confidently. Leo was simply out of his depth. Once we clear out his legacy structural errors, Project Nexus will generate unprecedented returns for your conglomerate. Fascinating, Victoria Thorne interjected, sliding a legal binder forward. Because according to our corporate repository logs, the only action you took today was attempting, and failing, to bypass a hardware encryption protocol patented personally by Mr. Morgan. Julian's confident smile faltered slightly. Well, we are simply clearing out his administrative blocks to integrate our proprietary operational framework. Enough lies, Mr. Vance, Arthur interrupted loudly, his deep voice booming off the glass walls. He stood up from his leather chair, looking toward the side private entrance. It is time you met the true authority behind Sterling Global Ventures. Arthur stepped away from his chair, turning toward the door and bowing his head respectfully. Good morning, boss. I pushed the side door open and walked into the boardroom. The silence that fell over the room was absolute, sharp, and suffocating. Chloe's jaw dropped open. The color instantly drained from her cheeks until her face turned deathly white, completely frozen in sheer, unadulterated shock. Beside her, Julian froze mid-breath, his hand hovering over his leather folder as his eyes bulged out in utter bewilderment. Leo, Chloe gasped out, her voice barely a hollow whisper. What are you doing here? Why is the chairman calling you boss? Because Leo Morgan holds 70% of controlling shares in Sterling Global Ventures, Arthur announced firmly, standing straight beside me. He is the majority owner, the founder of our technical division, and the ultimate head of this entire parent conglomerate. No, that's impossible, Julian stuttered, jumping out of his seat as sweat instantly broke out across his forehead. He's just a soft-spoken lead programmer. He worked in your server room. I allowed you to think that, Julian, I said smoothly, pulling out the plush leather chair at the absolute head of the table and sitting down. I crossed my hands over the polished surface, looking down at both of them with complete composure. My humility gave Bennett Tech its competitive edge. But my wife mistook my quiet dedication for weakness. Leo, Chloe choked out, tears brimming in her eyes as the horrifying magnitude of her mistake crashed down upon her. She looked at my tailored suit, at Arthur standing respectfully behind me, and at the gold fountain pen resting by my hand. You own Sterling Global? I own the company that funded your firm, Chloe, I corrected her coldly. I own the patents behind Project Nexus, and I own the decision regarding whether Bennett Tech survives until noon. Leo, please, Chloe cried out, dropping her folder onto the floor as she rushed around the table, falling onto her knees beside my chair. I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea. Julian tricked me. He told me you were holding the company back. I didn't trick anyone, Julian yelled out in a panic, his polished image completely disintegrating into cowardly fear. She came to me, She wanted an executive who looked good on camera. Victoria, I said calmly, ignoring the squabbling betrayers at my feet. Proceed with the legal disclosures. With pleasure, boss, Victoria declared, opening her master folder. Mr. Vance, we have filed formal criminal charges against you for corporate espionage, bank fraud, and the illegal transfer of copyrighted source code. Federal agents are waiting in the lobby downstairs to take you into custody. Julian slumped back into his chair, his hands shaking so violently he could no longer speak. And for Bennett Tech, Victoria continued, looking down at Chloe, Sterling Global hereby executes Clause 9. We are revoking your software operating license immediately and calling in our $40 million investment loan. Leo, no. Don't ruin me. Chloe sobbed hysterically, grabbing the fabric of my trousers. We're married. We can fix this. I love you. I looked down at her pale, tear-stained face, feeling no anger, no regret, and no pain, only absolute clarity. You loved status, Chloe, I said, gently pulling my leg away from her frantic grip. You threw away a devoted husband to chase a fraud. Now you can watch your empire collapse. 3 months after Bennett Tech collapsed into complete bankruptcy, I stood in my top-floor executive office at Sterling Global. Floor-to-ceiling glass panel windows offered a breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline. Sunlight warmed the spacious room, washing away every lingering shadow of past heartbreak. The server integration for the new innovation division is running flawlessly, Leo, Victoria Thorne reported, walking into my office with a sleek leather folder in her hands. No system lag or database resets? I asked, turning away from the window to face her. None whatsoever, Victoria confirmed with a sharp, victorious smile. With Julian Vance currently serving his federal prison sentence for grand larceny and corporate espionage, our software architecture remains entirely secure under your master key. Where do we stand on the former assets of Bennett Tech? I inquired, walking toward my desk. Our legal acquisition team purchased their remaining patents for pennies on the dollar during last week's court-ordered liquidation auction, Victoria explained smoothly. Everything has been absorbed directly into Sterling Global. Your corporate slate is completely clean. The office door opened, and my mother, Grace Morgan, stepped inside. She held 2 cups of warm coffee, looking around the expansive room with a proud, bright smile. Mom, I said warmly, walking over to accept one of the cups. Thank you for coming by. I wouldn't miss this launch for the world, Leo, Grace said, setting her cup down and adjusting the lapels of my tailored navy jacket. Seeing you standing here, in your proper place, makes every sacrifice you ever made completely worth it. It was a painful road, Mom, I admitted softly, looking down at the steam rising from my cup. There were moments when the public humiliation at that gala almost made me doubt my own path. A storm doesn't destroy a strong foundation, Leo. It merely strips away the dead leaves. Grace reminded me gently, patting my arm. You never lost your dignity, and you built an empire while keeping your integrity intact. Speaking of lingering storms, Victoria interjected, looking down toward the front plaza through the glass window. Security just notified me that Chloe Bennett is standing outside the main lobby entrance. I frowned slightly. Chloe? What does she want? She has been waiting on the sidewalk for 2 hours, begging security guards for 5 minutes of your time, Victoria informed me. Her personal property was auctioned off to pay Bennett Tech's creditors yesterday afternoon. I looked at my mother, then at Victoria. I'll handle this myself. I rode the private executive elevator down to the ground floor, stepping out through the heavy glass doors into the crisp autumn air. Chloe stood near the edge of the granite plaza. The contrast was staggering. Gone was the arrogant, polished CEO in high society designer dresses. She wore a simple, faded coat, her blonde hair pulled back loosely, and her eyes red-rimmed from endless weeping. The moment she spotted me walking toward her, her face lit up with desperate hope. Leo, Chloe cried out, running forward a few steps before 2 corporate security officers calmly stepped into her path to hold her back. Leo, please, just talk to me for a minute. Let her speak, gentlemen, I instructed the guards quietly. The officers stepped aside, allowing Chloe to approach me. She stopped 2 feet away, her hands trembling violently as she pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. "Leo, I lost everything," Chloe sobbed, fresh tears streaming down her pale, hollow cheeks. "The house, the car, the company, the bank seized my personal accounts yesterday. I have nowhere left to go." "You reaped what you sowed, Chloe," I said, keeping my voice calm, even, and detached. "You built your success on deception and traded genuine loyalty for Julian's cheap polish." "I know I was wrong," she wept hysterically, reaching out to grab my forearm, but I smoothly took a step back, keeping my hands resting casually in my jacket pockets. "I was blind, Leo. I let pride and ambition destroy my mind. Julian manipulated me into thinking you were holding me back. Julian didn't force you to fire me on that gala stage in front of 300 people, Chloe," I reminded her coldly. "You chose to humiliate me. You chose to sign off on his theft of my source code. I regret it every single second of my life," Chloe pleaded, dropping to her knees on the cold concrete plaza, looking up at me with frantic, desperate eyes. "I realize now that you were the true strength behind everything. You love me, Leo. Please, give me one more chance. I will work as an entry-level assistant in your firm. I will do anything." I looked down at the woman who had once been my wife, feeling no anger, no hatred, and no bitterness anymore. The deep pain that had once pierced my chest was entirely gone, replaced by a quiet, unwavering peace. "It's too late, Chloe," I said softly, looking her straight in the eye. "I spent 5 years elevating your life while hiding in your shadow. You mistook my humility for weakness, and you threw away a devoted partner for illusion. Leo, please don't leave me like this," she begged, her voice breaking into a ragged, pathetic whisper. "I have nothing left." "You have your choices, Chloe," I replied firmly. "I am no longer your safety net, and I will never be your stepping stone again." I turned my back on her weeping figure, walking steadily toward the grand glass entrance of the Sterling Global skyscraper. Her desperate calls slowly faded into the ambient hum of city traffic behind me. I rode the elevator back up to my top-floor suite, stepping into the sunlit room where Grace and Victoria stood waiting. "Is it finished, Leo?" Grace asked gently. "It's finished, Mom," I answered, taking a deep breath of the fresh, clean air inside the office. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out across the vast, shining expanse of the Chicago skyline. The heartbreak was officially behind me, buried under the weight of truth and justice. I had reclaimed my crown, and as I looked toward the horizon, I knew I was finally ready to build an honest, triumphant future on my own terms.